Shopify grows your business no matter how far or big you grow. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. Whether you're selling your fans' next favorite shirt or an exclusive piece of podcast merch, Shopify helps you sell everywhere. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the U.S. Allbirds, Rothy's, Brooklinen, and millions of other entrepreneurs of every size across 175 countries. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way. Because businesses that grow, grow with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in.
Hi everyone, I'm Deb Flashenberg. Welcome to Yoga, Birth, Babies, a podcast produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. We will be diving into everything prenatal yoga, birth, and baby related, hoping to inspire, educate, and empower you through your journey into motherhood. Thank you for listening.
Hi, I'm Deb Flashenberg, and I'm your host of Yoga Birth Babies. And today we have a community birth story. I loved the story. There was so much about it that I think will be so inspiring and relatable and encouraging. And I'll have to also say that Courtney Vasserman, our student, really explained to my great delight really the methodology that we teach at Prenatal Yoga Center and how it impacted in a positive way her pregnancy and her birth and how it really prepared her. I didn't actually know the extent to it until she started talking, and I was just so happy. Now, Courtney's story is just so beautiful. She talks about her birth and how she prepared and all the tools she used and really her sense of power and trust in her body and all the different coping skills and how they changed from early labor to active labor to transition and really gave us a sense of where her mind was. It was a beautiful, beautiful story. I'm so excited for you to hear. But she's also incredibly gracious and open with sharing the challenges that she had in her postpartum, from pelvic floor issues to breastfeeding issues to feeling isolated. I just am so appreciative that she shared this because I think she's opening up the curtain to what a lot of people experience, but may not know that other people are, or may just need to know that someone else has gone through it and they will too. They'll get through it. So I'm just really appreciative that Courtney was so gracious with her story and her experience. I'm really excited for you to hear that. Let me tell you a little bit about Courtney. So obviously she's a Prenatal Yoga Center graduate. Courtney grew up in Philadelphia suburbs and lived in New York, and she's in the advertising business since 2012. She's always dreamed of becoming a mother and is so in love with her baby girl. She lives in Manhattan with her husband, Alex, and her, actually at this point, it's 4.5-month-old Sophie and her adorable mini Bernedoodle muffin. So Courtney is a delight. I love having her in class. So I'm really excited for you to hear her story. I always like to take a moment before we get to Courtney's story just to share what's happening at Prenatal Yoga Center. And we're heading into late spring, getting ready for summer, my favorite time of year. And our classes are still going really strong. So it's exciting. We still have classes online 7 days a week, in-class studios 6 days a week. We have a full roster of workshops, both in studio and on demand. We've wrapped up our teacher training for the school year of 2023-2024. We're already registering people for our online teacher training for September, October of 2023. We have 4 a year. We do 3 online, 1 in person, and then 1 online postnatal teacher training. So we're kind of like a one-stop shop. If you're pregnant, we've got everything for you to help you through your pregnancy, prepare for your birth, prepare for your postpartum. If you're a yoga teacher, we've got 2 incredible programs to support you in learning how to support the perinatal person. Check all that out on our website, prenatalyogacenter.com. While I have your attention, I'm going to also ask you to take a moment to leave a rating and review for the podcast. It helps people find us. And with that in mind, also, if you have someone that you think would be a great fit for this podcast, send them my way. On our website, prenatalyogacenter.com, there is a podcast page and there's a podcast application. Fill it out. I'm always interested in learning who would be a great conversation, who we could have a great conversation with on the podcast. So fill that out. And if I haven't done a topic, or maybe you want me to try a different perspective, let me know that as well. Send me an email, deb@prenatalyogacenter.com. All right, enough of me. We're going to take a super quick break. When we come back, please enjoy this really empowering birth story with Courtney.
If you're struggling to lose weight, you've probably heard about weight loss medications like Wegovy or Zepbound, and you might be wondering if they're right for you. Meet PlushCare, a leading telehealth provider with doctors who are there for you day and night to partner with you in your weight loss journey. If you qualify, they can safely prescribe you medication from the comfort of your own home. To get started, visit plushcare.com/weightloss. That's plushcare.com/weightloss. plushcare.com/weightloss.
Americans take about 20,000 breaths a day and spend an average of 90% of their time indoors. The indoor air that we breathe can be up to 100 times more pollutant than the outdoor air, according to the EPA. Indoor air pollutants can cause respiratory symptoms like sneezing, congestion, scratchy throat, and even more serious health problems like lung and heart disease. So what's the solution? Introducing Air Doctor, the air purifier that filters out 99.99% of dangerous contaminants so your lungs don't have to. This includes allergens, pollen, pet dander, dust mites, mold spores, and even bacteria and viruses. Air Doctor comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee, so if you don't love it, just send it back for a refund minus shipping. Head to airdoctorpro.com and use promo code YBB, and you'll receive up to $300 off air purifiers. Exclusive to podcast customers, you'll also receive a free 3-year warranty on any unit, which is an additional $84 value. Lock in this special offer by going to airdoctorpro.com and use promo code YBB.
Our family has grown. Welcome to the world, Hannah Baby. Introducing a new collection, Hannah Soft, made with Tencel. It's so breathable, with stretchy comfort for all of baby's first moments. And it's cool and gentle on their skin all year round. Entrusted Hannah quality for your most precious gift. Hannah Soft, made to last. Shop now at hannahanderson.com.
Hi, Courtney. How are you?
Hi, I'm good.
I'm so excited to hear about your birth story because, one, I love birth stories, but I'm also excited to talk about your postpartum because you opened up in postnatal yoga that you had some challenges. So first of all, I thank you for sharing that because I know it may be uncomfortable to talk about, or maybe it's not, but I think it's so important for others to hear that because I think sometimes there's this picture painted of parenthood like all smiles, cute baby, everyone's happy. And that's not the case for many, many people. So I'm just really appreciative that you're sharing your experience.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to talking about it, kind of in a cathartic way.
Oh, good. Well, I look forward to being that container for you. So I guess before we get to all that, I'd love to learn a little bit more about you. Tell me about yourself.
Yeah. So I grew up in the Philadelphia suburbs, and I moved to New York about 12 years ago. I'm currently on maternity leave, but I work in advertising as a strategist, which is basically the person sort of like digging through research and culture to find like truths and nuances and insights that can inspire creative ideas. And then make that resonate in a lot of different media channels. So I'm kind of like always embedded in cultural things that are happening and things around my client's business, which was really interesting because at the beginning of COVID I had a baby care client that I was working on. So I started to dig into a lot of information there, which inspires a lot of probably what we'll talk about today. And I currently live in Manhattan with my husband and my daughter and our first quote unquote baby, which is our dog, Muffin. And yeah, that's me right now.
All right. So next time you come to postnatal yoga, I want to dig into your brain about the advertising stuff because I find that stuff fascinating. I always thought that was like a missed opportunity for me. I love research. I love kind of thinking how people's brains are. So I might corner you at some point and dig into your brain. So thank you for sharing that. So one thing I know you mentioned was a bit about your own perception of birth. And it's funny that you had written this in for kind of the intake for the podcast. Because one of the essays that I have my teacher trainees write is about a past family story, birth story, and how it influenced their perception of birth. And you also had mentioned that. So I'd love for you to share, how did your past family birth stories influence your perception of birth?
Yeah. Before my mom and I even talked about her birth for me, I had always thought, like, I'm not scared about carrying a baby. I'm not scared about being a mother because I've always wanted to be a mother. I've always babysat, nannied, all that. But I was always a little skeptical about the actual process of getting a child out of your body. And then as like I was getting older, my mom and I would talk a little bit more about, what she experienced when she was birthing me and my brother. And her experience with me, I mean, it was back in the 80s, but did not sound very good. She tried to get an epidural, it failed. And then she was in labor for like a crazy amount of hours, like something like 40 some hours, with a lot of like labor pains. And then she tore. And she even recently had told me, as I've been going through postpartum, that bonding experience between her and I took her some time because she was in so much pain postpartum. Mm-hmm. So I always listened to that story and was like, oh my God, birth is going to be really long. It's like this crazy marathon. Like, you're pushing this child out into the world and it's like a little scary. And then when she talked to me about my brother's birth, which was after mine, she was like, I decided not to get the epidural because it didn't take the first time. And obviously it's the second child, so things are different, but she went to the hospital a lot later than she went with me. And she was like, I just walked the hallways back and forth and just kept walking the hallways to like bring him down. And even though she had back labor with him, which sounds horrific, it sounded like she had a better experience. And he was a very, very large baby. So I kind of had those two experiences in the back of my head a lot as I was like going through my pregnancy of, very long, sort of like trying and tiring labor compared to a shorter, even still intense, but shorter sort of labor that was more, I guess, unmedicated. And it impacted a lot of my decisions, I think, around what I, went into thinking I wanted for my labor.
So that's a great segue into how you prepared for your birth, because you had two very different birth scenarios kind of interwoven into your fabric of how you saw birth. So based on that, and based on starting to construct how you wanted to give birth, how did you start to prepare for that?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing I started to do is like read books, which I think kind of like scared me more. But I read like Emily Oster's because that's what everyone reads now.
Well, you also love research, so that makes sense.
Yeah, very true. I was like, oh, all the data is very helpful. My aunt sent me Megan Trainor's book, which was really short and really good because she had a different kind of birth than she expected. She ended up having a C-section for her first child. And so she talks a little bit about that in the book and she goes through postpartum stuff. So that was a really good book. I read Nurture, which I loved. That was probably my favorite book. It's from a doula wrote that one. And then I started like doing a bunch of, who should I follow on Instagram? Obviously the strategist in me was like, I need to, know what everyone's talking about and the questions people are asking on Instagram stories and stuff like that. So following like Dr. Sterling, she's really great about, I guess, advanced maternal pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like feeling pretty decent in my pregnancy. And I was like, I think I should I had a friend who was maybe 3 months ahead of me in her pregnancy. And she was like, I've been doing yoga. It's really great. You should think about doing that if you're feeling well enough. And I was like, okay, like maybe I'll look into that. So I found you guys. And I started taking Ellen's class. And that was like probably the best crash course I felt like I could take for anything to start to learn about what was going on in my body or what was gonna happen in my body, because I felt like I had no clue. I knew nothing about how the pelvis moves, hips, like the pelvic floor. I didn't even know what that was before birth. And
Yeah, that's
with
our
all of
mojo.
her,
That's our secret sauce.
yeah,
We love that at PYC.
I just loved it. I took to it. And I think that was some of the best education I felt like I could get, other than also moving my body and like doing the moves that I needed to honestly help me cope during my actual birth. So that was a lot of my preparation. Like I started taking Ellen's classes and some of Patricia's classes like 17 weeks into my pregnancy. And I took it until the day before I went into labor for like 2 to 3 days a week. So it was really helpful, like the repetition. And I think for me, what was really helpful in preparing was having like understanding that the way you guys architect the classes with like the waves of labor, I was like, oh, okay, I can understand that this is how it's going to go. So I could like plan it a little bit, not truly plan it, but like think about it in my head and prepare for it. And then like find different coping mechanisms and like play with those and practice those outside of class to understand what I liked and what I didn't like, so that my body would just like go into like go straight into that.
Yeah, it's like conditioning.
Yeah, exactly. I felt like a lot of my friends and a lot of people I know, aside from my mother, had kind of gone into their labors either not wanting to know anything or just like, I'm going to get the epidural. I'm going to do whatever the doctors say. And I think my fear helped me in a way, because I was like, I agree with doctors. I think they're great. And I want to deliver in a hospital, but I need to know, like, this is my experience. I need to know what I'm going to be doing. And I need to train my body for it. So a lot of all of that and those people talking in my heads actually, I feel like helped push me into like a great direction for a really great birth experience.
I can't wait to hear about the birth experience, but I am curious about one thing. And first of all, like,
Yeah.
I have such a smile on my face because you just stated everything that our methodology stands for. It's the repetition, it's learning about yourself, it's a curiosity. And then one thing you said, which I'm like, yay, was that you practice these at home, because that's what we would literally say in our class. We're like, what are you resonating with? Is it mantras? Is it focused breathing? Like, what is it? And then practice that. So you start it and your body just kind of falls into it, and then talk to your partner about it so they know how to help you and how to lead you if you're feeling a little overwhelmed. So, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I worked so well for you. So what were some of the things that you found that resonated with you on the mat that then you practiced at home?
Yeah. Obviously things like cat cow, just certain positions really helped me. Ellen talked a lot about breathing to help with your nervous system, which for me was huge, because like my nervous system gets all out of whack a lot. Like I will faint from it and all this stuff. So I was like, I need to not faint during birth. So we did, I practiced a lot of like breathing in 4, out 6 or 8, and like calming myself down and placing my head on a block and just like reminding myself to do that kind of breathing.
Beautiful.
And then the other thing I did a lot of was like doing something that was like painful for me, whether it's like wall squats, which is very painful for me, or like, I forget what it is, but like sitting on your heels or your
Oh,
toes are
screaming
sort of,
toe.
oh my gosh, it's the worst.
It is the worst. Oh my gosh, I hate it. I hate it and yet love
really
it.
tight feet.
Yeah, I hear you. Like that actually kind of nauseates me. It is such a big sensation in my body. And yet other people just like sit there like they could do their taxes. Like they have no problem. So you pick the two juicy ones.
Yeah, it's like such a big sensation for me too. And that was the thing, was when I was practicing it, I wanted to mention this because I kept being like, is this painful for me? Or can I reprogram this in my brain to think about it as just a really big, overwhelming sensation?
I love
Because
that.
if I can go into labor being like, I'm just going to have really overwhelming sensations, then I can get through it. But if I go into labor being like, I'm in so much pain, I need help, like that thought of like, someone help me, I'm in so much pain, like give me all the meds, give me all the help that you can, then how am I ever going to convince myself that I can get through it?
Yeah.
So that was like a big thing, that practicing those helped me like kind of like reframe pain in my head for birth specifically, which I think really helped.
Oh, wow. Wow. I love this because it really speaks to what we do. And I'm so, so glad that it landed with you and that you were able to use this. All right. So we need to hear a birth story now. So we're going to take a super quick break. And when we come back, I just want to hear it all. So we'll be right back. Okay, we're back. So I'm just going to hand the mic over to you and share your story.
Okay, great. So I had a really great birth experience, and I have a lot of friends who didn't. So this, as I said in the beginning, is pretty cathartic to just get it out and have other people like listen and hear that birth can be a great experience. So my birth story like kind of started at my 38-week appointment, because I went in and I was like, I think I'm ready for a cervical exam. And the doctor was like, do you want one? Do you not? Which I love that she asked me and didn't just do it. And I was like, yeah, I just need to know. And after that, she was like, you're 1 centimeter dilated, you're 60 to 70% effaced. And like, truthfully, it might not mean anything, but what it does tell me is where your starting point is. And when you go into labor, you're not starting at zero. And she specifically said to me, she was like, so I would predict, but I can't tell if this is for sure, because, this could also tell us nothing, that you're going to have a faster labor. You're not going to be somebody who is laboring for 36 hours. And I think you're going to go before your due date. So I was like, okay, I can live with that in my head. Go home from that. And then I had like a few days after that, where I was kind of having at night, like I'd wake up with some like light contractions on and off. And then the longest one would last is like for an hour. And I had a doula. So I would text my doula and I'd be like, I'm having some contractions, but then they would go away. She was like, just go back to bed. So then a Tuesday night, I wake up in the middle of the night at like 3 a.m. And I was having that same like on and off contractions. And I'm like, okay, I really need to go to the bathroom. I go to the bathroom, I get up and I'm like, oh, feels like wetter than normal. And I go to the bathroom and like my underwear is wet. Like I didn't pee myself, but I was like, I don't know if this is my water. Like, I don't really know what this is. And then there was blood, and my doula had told me that's a big sign. Like if there's blood, that means like things could be getting going. Like you could be getting into early labor. So I was like, oh, okay, this is like kind of exciting. So I get back into bed and I kindly like, just like, touch my husband. I'm like, I think I might be in labor. And then like, I kind of like giggled a little bit, cause like I wasn't like really feeling anything just yet. And then I was like, oh my God, this is happening. And then I like jumped up and down. I was feeling all these like emotions together. I was like, she's coming. And he just like turns to me and he's like, try to rest. That's what like our doula would say, like, let's try and rest. So I was like, okay. So I laid back down and I was like, I can't rest. Like, I can't sleep through this. I don't know anyone who is having like contractions and can like rest. So that was like 3 o'clock. And then like over the course, so I started tracking them, and over the course of the hour, it's like they're coming every 15 minutes. Then they start coming every 8 minutes. Then like around 4 o'clock, it's every like 6 minutes. And I'm like, this is happening like rather quickly. And they're starting to get like a little stronger, but not too intense. Like I'm still like lying in bed. And so I think it was around like 5 a.m. I started to notice on the app, I was like, oh, it went from 8 minutes. Now it's like 5 minutes. It's been 5 minutes for like 20 minutes. That's like, that seems a little iffy. So I called my doula back, because I had called her earlier, and I was like, so this is where we're at. Like they're happening every 5 minutes, I think. And, she was very calm about it and was like, okay, so you can try and go back to sleep, but if you can't sleep, I can make my way over to you, or I can meet you at the hospital. But, if I make my way over to you, like it will be 45 minutes. And so I was like, I don't know. And she's like, try and rest a tiny bit more and call me back if like you really can't handle it. So I told my husband to like go get a bagel. I was like, we're not going to eat for a while, because I always in my head was like, this is going to be a really long process. So like, go get a bagel. We're not going to eat for 2 days. And when you come back, like I'll eat the bagel and we'll figure out where to go from there. Well, he comes back and I try and eat this like plain bagel with butter, and I just can't, like nothing in my body is letting me eat it. I mean, I'm having pretty intense contractions at this point. I'm using like mantras. I'm doing like counter pressure with my hair clip on my hands to like, oh yeah. I was like, I like grabbed it on my side table and was like, I'm like rocking and swaying at at our kitchen counter. And he's like, I think you should call the doula back. So I call her back, and she's like, listens to a contraction, and she's like, let's meet at the hospital. Like just very calmly, like, oh, like, she knew how far along I was, and I had no clue. And she's like, let's just meet at the hospital. So at this point, it's like rush hour in New York City. We live on the east side, on the Upper East Side, and my hospital was on the Upper West Side. So we had to get across town in rush hour. And so we get in this Uber. I'm like clearly very actively laboring, just breathing my way through it, putting my head against like the chair in front of me. And the Uber driver is like, is this your first? And we're like, yeah. And he's like, you're my first pregnant lady. You're blessing my Uber.
He said it in the back of his head. It's probably like, just as long as you don't birth in my Uber.
Yeah. And I was just so happy because everyone told me like, oh, good luck getting in a cab. Good luck getting in an Uber. Like they hate it when pregnant ladies get in your car. And he's like, you're blessing my Uber. I was like,
that
oh
is
my
sweet.
God.
That is so sweet.
You're so sweet. So yeah, so then we get to the hospital, and we get into the lobby, and I'm like having a major contraction, and I just like scream out to my husband. I'm like, why are there no chairs in here? Like, why are there no chairs in this lobby? And somebody must have like heard me and put me in a wheel and was like, Miss, do you want a wheelchair? I was like, yes, please. And so I get in a wheelchair. They take me up to labor and delivery. And so at this point, it's been maybe like from 3 to 8. It's been like 5 hours. And they take me into triage, and it's like everything's like the contractions are like very intense at this point. I have no clue how frequently they're happening. I couldn't even do the paperwork at labor and delivery. I was just like, get me in triage. And they do the cervical. One of the PAs does the first cervical, and she's like, and she looks at the other woman. She's like, I don't really think I feel anything. And then the other woman looks at me and she's like, I'm really sorry, Courtney, but I need to do another cervical on you. And I was like, oh,
because your cervix is basically gone because it's your 10 centimeters.
Yeah.
Is that where we're going with this?
Almost. Yeah. But also because like when I did the cervical exam at my doctor was so gentle. I was like, this is so easy. And then at the hospital, I was like, oh my God, this is going all the way back into my brain. Like it was very painful. And that was like true pain. That wasn't an overwhelming sensation. It was just like straight up pain. And so the other woman does it and she's like, oh, you're 8.5. Like we got to get you in a room. And I was like, oh gosh. And so cause I had done like my research and stuff and I take the childbirth classes, and, listen to Ellen so much. I knew that once you get to 8 centimeters, you're like in that transition phase. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm like so far. I always wanted to labor a lot at home, but I never really expected the way I labored at home to be how it was. Like, I kind of thought I'd be like in the shower and moving around and all this stuff, not like just in bed trying to eat a bagel and then like running out the door, So I was like very much like, oh, this is happening very quickly. And they were like, who do you want in the room with you? Your doula's here, your husband's here. I was like, oh, my husband can come in the room for triage. Because they don't usually like let people in the room. And he comes in and he like looks at me and he's like no clue what to do, even though like we practiced a lot of things. He's like, oh, yeah, okay. And I'm like in transition. And he's like, are you sure you don't want Taylor here? And I was like, okay. Like he's like knew the doula needed to like come in. So she came in and she like whispered in my ear, and part of my birth plan was like, I didn't think I wanted an epidural. I always was like, if I can't take it or if it's for a very long period of time and I'm like so exhausted, then I probably will give into it, but I'm not really sure if I wanted it. So she like leans over to me and she's like, they're going to start asking you if you want the epidural. Like you tell me, do you want it? And I looked at her and I'm like, I'm in transition, right? And she's like, oh girl, you're in it. And I was like, okay, we're not getting the epidural. Like, let's do this thing. So they take me out of the triage room, and the worst thing other than the cervical exam and triage was them putting the IV in my hand.
Ugh,
yeah. I like never wanted the IV, and I know it's hospital policy and stuff. And I probably needed it because I dehydrate very quickly. But that IV, because I was so like truly sweaty the whole entire labor, like it would just not stay on my hand and it kept flopping off. And I kept just, even when I was like in the labor and delivery room, I kept just like putting my hand up and being like, can someone take care of this, please? Can someone like deal with this IV thing? Because it's just constantly pricking me. So that was just like so annoying. So we go from triage to labor and delivery, and I had always expected that my labor and delivery room, I guess I just painted this picture in my head that I'd get there and I'd be on the birthing ball, or I'd be like sidelining with the peanut ball, or I'd like be in the shower, like I'd be moving around the room. So I get into the room and they transfer me to the bed, and I have the hospital gown on, and my doula looks at me and she's like, do you want to get out of the bed? Do you think you can? Do you want to stay in the bed? And I just like ripped my hospital robe off. And I'm like, I can't get out of this bed. So I'm like butt naked, like, and I like go right into like doing like cat cow on the bed, and just like breathing through it. And I was honestly like and this was probably maybe 10 o'clock. I'm not sure what time at this point, like 10 a.m. So only a couple hours later, I'm just, laboring basically, almost 10 centimeters dilated, like almost pushing, and like laboring on all fours, for the most part of the labor in the labor delivery room. And everyone in the team was so great about it. Like the nurses came in, they put all the monitors on that they needed to, and they didn't ask me to move into a different position. They were just like, let me do my thing, and told me, what they were doing and putting on me. And then the doctor came in and I'm like still on all fours, and he's like, you're doing good. Like, you're doing great. Like, this is moving along. Just stay how you are. I'll be back in a little bit. And I was like, okay. And I had a bunch of, coping mechanisms that I was like told my doula and my husband. So like the counter pressure, like they brought out combs and I was holding those, and they had like a wet towel with ice that they were like putting on me because I was like very, very warm and very hot. And probably the best part was my doula, as I was like feeling these like overwhelming contractions at this point, because it was like so intense for so long. She kept telling me to like breathe the baby down and kept having me vocalize like very low. Whereas I wanted to like screech, she would be like, go like, ah. And so we would do that together, like over and over as I was having contractions. Like she would vocalize with me. So we were like making a bit of a chorus in the room. um, and, and so then we got to a point where I was like, I feel like I need to push. And she looked at me and she was like, do you need to push when you have the contractions only, or all the time you feel like you need to push? And I was like, I think all the time. And she was like, okay, like, great. That means like you're ready. So let's get the doctor in here, like back in here. And so the doctor comes back in, and he was really great too. I mean, I went to a high risk practice, even though I'm not really high risk. And he let me push on all fours, or at least try to push on all fours. And then we tried the sideline with a peanut ball pushing. And then I ultimately ended up pushing her out on my back with people sort of pushing my feet. I was like pushing my feet against them as if I was in a squat, but on my back. And so, yeah, and like all during that, like as I was like pushing her out, they kept kind of saying like, oh, we see her, but then she's going back in. Oh, we see her. Like, she's coming. She's coming. I kept being like, I'm trying. And they're like, you're doing it. And that was like really great and reassuring, because I kept being like, I'm trying really hard. And they're like, you're not trying. You're actually getting this done. Like, you're going to get this done. And I like needed that encouragement, because at that point, like my body is just like so overwhelmed and like shaking, and just a lot of like overwhelming feelings, I guess. And then towards the very end of like pushing, when she was like crowning, they were like, do you want to mirror? Do you want to touch her? And I was like, oh, I don't really know if that's me, like, I don't really know if I'm that girl that like wants to do that. But then I just was like, you know what? Why not? I'll touch her head. And that feeling for me was like really helpful, because I was able to be like, oh, there's like, she's right there. Like, I just need to like push a little bit harder, bear down a little bit harder, like keep going. And it's like going to be done in a couple minutes. And so I pushed for about like an hour and a half. And yeah, she came out and she was great and she was crying and they put her right on my chest, and I held her for like, well, they had to like take some amniotic fluid out of her after about a few minutes after on my chest, but then they put her back on me and I held her for like an hour, and it was great.
Oh my God, I love that story. I love that story. I was like
and I only
there
labored for 8
seeing it.
hours.
That's pretty amazing for a first-time parent. The average first time is 12 to 24. So, you know what I love so much about that story, because I was like seeing you there. I also know that hospital. When I was a doula, I was there many times. So I was literally like, I know triage. I know where she was going. I know. So I had very much, I had the image like really there. But one thing that is so special about your story is you single-handedly will change the perception of birth for your child from the stories you heard in your family. So where you unknowingly, like you didn't realize this, or your mom, didn't realize, but by sharing the challenges that, that painted that idea of like, I just have to get through it. But you can share with your daughter the amazing, empowering, powerful story of her birth. So should she choose to have children, she can approach it with that sense of, I can do this. My mom did this. I can do this. I'm powerful.
Yeah.
So I'm just so happy for you. I'm just so happy for you.
And I think one thing that my mom gave me that was so helpful for me was she kept saying, you need you need the right people in the room for you.
Yeah,
And you need to breathe through it, because my mom had an unmedicated
that's
birth.
true. But
Well,
birth number two,
two unmedicated births, right?
one intentional.
And yeah. And she just kept being like, you need to find your breath and you need to breathe through it. And that truly was the thing that helped me so much, was being like, okay, what does that mean for me? How do I what does breathing through each stage mean for me? And like when I was laboring at home, it was like breathing with mantras, like to let go and to ease up. And then when I was, active laboring, it was like the 4-6 breathing. And then when I was pushing, it was like not holding my breath,
Yeah.
even though at one point they told me to, and I was like, yeah, no, I'm not going to hold my breath.
And I love you also made the big sounds. Oh, I love it. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
Yeah.
Yay. I'm so happy for you and happy for just your family. It's and happy that our community can hear this. Thank you so, so much for sharing your birth story. All right. We're going to pivot though, because now I want to hear anything you want to share about the postpartum journey.
I would say postpartum is very hard. I think I did so much preparation and so much research into the actual birth experience that I always said to myself, I know how to care for a baby. Like I've cared for so many babies ever since I was so young that I got this. And so I did really no preparation at all for postpartum. I did no research on breastfeeding, even though I was like, I'm going to breastfeed for a year. I did no research on sleep deprivation and like how to work with your partner. I didn't plan or prepare because I just thought like it's going to come naturally. I've always had a motherly instinct. And I think for me, what there were like maybe 2 or 3 things that were really, really hard and have just recently, now that I'm around like 4 months postpartum, like 4 or 5 months postpartum, like have finally like eased up, is the combination of hormone changes mixed with breastfeeding struggles, mixed with healing, and I guess add sleep deprivation to that, because like there's no way you're sleeping for the first month at least. Um, all of that combined just really put me in a very like sadly negative space. I knew, I was like, I love this baby. I birthed this baby. I wanted this baby. Um, and I believe I can be great with this baby, and my family can be great, like me and my husband and my dog. But there were so many days where I was just like, I, I'm overwhelmed by anxiety or fear or pain or, just like, yeah, I guess those are all the words that I was like feeling at the time. So the first like 6 to 8 weeks were really, really hard. Actually, the first like 14 weeks were really, really hard for me. Mostly I had a tear that was mostly internal. And as that was healing, it like overhealed and created this like tissue that was very tender and painful. And I didn't realize I have a really high pain threshold, obviously, because I didn't have a medicated birth. And I didn't realize how bad it was getting. And this was after my 6 week appointment. It wasn't until I got to like 10 weeks that I was like, oh God, I need to like go back to my doctor, because like I can't really sit on the floor. I'm having pain when I'm going from sitting to standing. Like this is not normal. And that was impacting me a lot because I was very active my whole pregnancy. I mean, I was like doing Pilates the first trimester. I did yoga the whole time. I walked a ton. And I'm just an active person. So, having 14 weeks of not even being okay to sit to stand, that was really hard for me.
Probably emotionally hard as well as physically hard.
Emotionally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, it wasn't even the physical part of it. I was just like, ow, ow. Okay, I could take Tylenol. Maybe that will help a little bit. But it was really emotionally grueling.
Did you get a
Um,
chance to see a pelvic floor PT? I know Taylor as a doula, and she's amazing. So I would suspect she advised that. I don't know how
yeah.
if that came to
Yeah.
fruition.
She did. And so she advised that. And when I finally went back to my doctor at like 10 weeks and I asked about that, like, should I do that? And they were like, we got to wait for this tear to heal because you can't really do internal work until everything is like cauterized and okay down there. So I was like, okay, that's fair. So it's not until maybe the past like 3 weeks I started to do pelvic floor PT, which has been helping me a lot.
Oh, so good. Great. I'm so happy to
Yeah.
hear that.
Yeah. So that was really hard. And I just think like no one really talks about that. Like people talk about a lot of like healing when it comes to C-sections. People talk about, your body just like quote unquote getting back to what it was, which to me is such BS. But no one talks about how like the tears and the trauma down there like can really take not just a physical toll, but like truly an emotional toll to somebody
Yeah.
who's like, an active person.
I had that with my first. I didn't have any tearing. I had like what my midwife called a skid mark, but um, I had significant pelvic floor issues. I had pelvic organ prolapse, and I
Mm,
figured it out because I'm like, it shouldn't feel like this. I took a mirror and I'm like, it shouldn't
yeah.
look like this. And
Mm,
as someone also who is, I can just so relate this, like physically active, like it is hard for me to sit still, to not be able to get back to a routine of feeling comfort. And then I started seeing a PT, a pelvic floor PT around 6 weeks, and it turned things around, but it felt debilitating in a way. And I don't know if
yeah.
you felt this, but sometimes I was angry when I'd see other new parents be like, oh, I'm 6 weeks, I'm out jogging already. And I'm like, oh my God, I feel like my pelvic floor is just like down to my ankles. There's no way I could be
Hmm.
that physical. So it really emotionally took a toll. And so I don't know if that's kind of how you felt as well.
Yeah. It really is how I felt. Cause like then also I went to the pelvic floor PT and they're like, oh, your pelvic floor is really tight, but you also have a little bit of prolapse. And I'm like, how do those two things go together? Like,
They
I don't
do.
know.
Unfortunately, they do.
So it's like, and then I'm like trying to have to relearn how it all works.
Yeah.
So yeah, it has been, it truly has been, it was really hard for me, emotionally when I started like taking my daughter to classes and stuff around like 8 weeks. And I'd see all these moms like their nails done, their hair done, their this. I'm like, oh my, like I felt horrible about myself. Like, how can they put themselves all together and look like they feel okay when I'm still like not feeling okay, So um, that was really hard for me.
Yeah.
That was one thing that was really hard for me. And then I think I had mentioned this to you, like breastfeeding.
Breastfeeding was a challenge. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of people, like a handful of my friends have talked about how breastfeeding was like a challenge to them, but they never really got into like the specifics of it until until I started having issues and I started like grilling them. But for me, I think the hardest it became a big emotional struggle for me. Obviously there was things like I was having pain and we were trying to get that solved, and it was around her latch, and logistically I had no clue what I was doing, even though I'd seen many people breastfeed before and she had no clue what she was doing. But it started to become like that mixed with my physical pain, both down there and at my boobs. and started to become like a big piece of anxiety for me. Like I would get really anxious about like, is she eating enough? Is she getting enough? And I had all this like feeding anxiety, and I I hated pumping, but I didn't know I hated pumping, so I kept pumping to like increase my supply. And it was just all of these things that I knew nothing about, and I was trying to learn it all and do it all um, in a time where I was in a lot of pain, had no sleep, and it was very, very, I guess, overwhelming for me, and in a way, like lonely. Although
Yeah.
I did have, my husband for support, and I got a lactation consultant for one consult, and I did have friends that were texting me and trying to help me and talk through it with me. And going back to what you had said, like when, you were 6 weeks and you saw all these other women, like, you know, and you sort of felt upset about it. Like that was me with breastfeeding. Like I would, see other women breastfeed, or see it online, or hear about it, or follow people on Instagram that talk about breastfeeding. And I was just like, why can't I get it done? Like, why can't we figure it out? And so it started to really just take an emotional toll on me. But it took me a really long time to figure that out, to figure out that like breastfeeding was causing like our inability to really like get in the groove of it was causing a lot of my anxiety and causing a lot of, I guess my like depression at the time, or baby blues, or whatever you want to call them. And that was like, took me like 8 weeks to figure that out. And then finally, obviously, breastfeeding starts getting like easier. But I was like, I can't. Uh, I finally like came to terms with for myself that this is not good. Like exclusive breastfeeding with this child is not going to work for us and for my mental health. And that matters a lot to my child. It took me a really
Yeah.
long time to get there.
Yeah. I did a podcast about this because I was talking to a doula, a postpartum doula, and she said she wanted to normalize bottle feeding a lot because of the emotional toll and the mental toll it
Mm,
takes on the parent that's having a hard time. There's so many emotions. Like you said, like, why can't I do it? Guilt, I want to do this.
mm-hmm.
And there's so many hormonal changes, there's so many life changes, there's so much, healing that what my guest that was speaking about this, she said, we can remove that one piece that is causing turmoil and choose to bottle feed, and it's okay. And I loved that point of view. And I'm so glad that you came to that, because it's like you said, your mental health is so important for you and your family and your baby.
Yeah. Yeah. I like finally came to that. I mean, it took like a really long time, but I agree with everything you just said. Like, there's so much guilt in it. I had this perception for myself that every child I have, I'm going to breastfeed them till a year. Like, and when I say breastfeed, I was like, I'm going to exclusively breastfeed, or I'm going to breastfeed and pump. Like, they're only going to get breast milk. And that was just not realistic in this case. So I had to come to terms with that. I started to have to figure out the world of formula, which shouldn't be complicated, but like was
There's
in my
so many
head at the
formulas.
time.
There's
I
so many
know.
formulas out
Like
there.
I have friends that are just like, I just went with whatever the doctor recommended. And I was like, nah, I want something organic and this and that. Like I was just so anxiety ridden at the time that like I needed, I was like, I got to do what's best. And yeah, it was just like, oh, and I kept saying like, oh, I'm going to build up. I had a lot of times where I was waffling. I was sort of like, do I build up my supply and do exclusive pumping? Do I try and do this exclusive breastfeeding? Well, I'm going to go back to work eventually. So maybe like I should do a little bit of both, or should I just switch to formula? It was just like probably a month of me going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth of like, what I should do. I couldn't make a decision. And finally, I sat down, had like a come to Jesus moment with myself where I was like, I don't like pumping. So exclusive pumping needs to be off the table. Like, we need to get that off the table right now because it's not something that helps my mental state. So that was the first thing to go. I had to like wean myself off of the additional like pumping sessions and, if I, and start like thinking about like introducing formula. And then, it's just was like a process. And now I'm at a point, we're 4.5 months postpartum and I breastfeed once a day and I use formula for the rest of the feeds. And it's lovely. Like it's
so
working and it's great. And, I use the formula brand Bobby and I love so much about that company. I'm obviously a strategist in advertising, so I love, their whole brand, but I love so much about them because they talk so much about combo feeding and that you can have a breastfeeding journey that doesn't look like just exclusive breastfeeding. And that to me was like a big light bulb moment because I always looked at it as like, oh, you if you're breastfeeding for that long, it's just breast milk, and now I'm like, oh no, it's not just breast milk. Like it's solids and it's formula. That's okay, but I can still be giving my baby the breast milk as it's maturing with my baby maturing for as long as this is working for us.
Oh, I'm so glad you found something that's working for you. I mean, I think that's really what it is. Like finding the birth that works for you, finding the way you want to parent that works for you, sorry, there's a fire engine going by. I'll pick that up again.
Mhm.
I'm so glad that you found what works for you because like we talked about, this is all individual. You found the way that you want to birth, how you want to parent, and how you want to feed your baby. And I think what's so important is that, again, it's what works for your family and who cares what other people do. I'm so glad. And I thank you for sharing that because I think there's a lot of people out there that may hear this and just feel a sigh of relief of feeling connected with someone else that is going through this and not feel so isolated and lonely by their experience. So you've shared so much. I'm so appreciative. We're going to take one more break. And when we come back, what is one final tip or piece of advice you'd like to offer new and expectant parents? We'll be right back. We're back. Wow, you shared, Courtney, so much. I'm so excited to go back and like take notes on this and be like, we had this and highlight this and link to this, but so much. You shared so much. So from your 4.5 months as a parent, as well as your incredible preparation for birth, what is one final tip or piece of advice you'd like to offer new and expectant parents?
Wow, there's so many. I guess
throw more than one in if you want.
Yeah. Well, when I think about what we talked about postpartum, my biggest tip for people, especially women who have focused their life around their big careers and are kind of like type A, like me, and sort of always, searching for the next thing and looking for the next thing, is just, it's okay to slow down. Like, like it's okay to really slow down. Like, and that was really hard for me to realize, as I've been on maternity leave and in those first like 4 weeks, like it's okay to spend 5 days in bed after giving birth. Sorry. It's okay to ask someone else to pick up the baby. It's okay to not go for that mile walk when you're 3 weeks postpartum. It's okay to just hold your baby all day if they won't sleep in their crib. And that's an accomplishment for the day. And I think like that's one thing I just want, women, especially like, these New York City women to think about is like in postpartum, like you don't need to be running around. It's really, really, really hard, but it's like okay to slow down because it's like going to be better for you in the long run.
Absolutely.
And that's something I can't wait to do. And when I give birth again, it's like really take that in and really do
birth. I love you have your second birth and postpartum in mind already.
Oh yeah. My friend had a baby like 3 weeks ago and I looked at my husband. I'm like, okay, like, let's go. Let's have another.
Oh my gosh, you are fun. I love it. Actually, one of my close friends, I was the doula for her birth, her very first. I was actually the doula for all three, but after her first birth, which she had such a turnaround. When I met her, she was like, I want the epidural now. She was like 20 weeks pregnant. So she had an unmedicated birth. And after, she literally said, I loved that. I can do that again. And I'm like, wow. So you make me think of my friend Liz. But Courtney, I'm so happy to hear that. And that is something, as a type A person myself, I really appreciate that you highlighted that, because I was not very graceful at that. It was hard.
Yeah, same.
And it's something that I try to remind the community, and thank you for also reminding the community of like turning the dial down a little bit. We don't have to push ourselves so hard, because if someone's type A, they probably already do that just innately, from habit. And now just that reminder of, especially in parenthood, and that huge transition. So thank you for those wonderful words. And thank you so much for sharing. I so enjoyed this conversation, and you were just so open and generous with your experience. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I hope it helps other people, and especially with the postpartum stuff. Anyone can reach out to me. I love talking about it. And I hope that, it makes people see themselves a little bit in it, or not feel alone as they're going into this experience.
Thank you.
This has been an episode of Yoga Birth Babies, produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. You can catch us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Periscope. I'm Deb Flaschenberg. Thanks for listening.